Say hello to Marcus Bailey, Toledo, Ohio. Marcus was coming home from night with playing some sports with some of his pals, and a large group of black people came upon him and beat him with a baseball bat. Now he's either permanently disfigured, brain dead, or by the time you're hearing this, he might not even be alive. Now let's check the local news story about what happened. Notice how many times they take pains to remind us this was a random act. That is what we call in the news business one big, fat, honking lie.
Good evening. We are starting tonight with a brutal beating in what police believe is a random attack. A 16-year-old was hit in the head with a metal baseball bat while walking along Main Street in Toledo. His injuries are critical, his family devastated. The mother of the teen is speaking out in an interview you will only see on 13 ABC, and Michaela Marshall talked with her tonight. Michaela.
Bill, 16-year-old Marcus Bailey was just playing ball in the neighborhood park with his friends when a group of unknown suspects jumped him for no reason, beating him with his own metal bat. 16-year-old Marcus Bailey is described as a quiet boy who loves computers and graphic design. He's a sophomore at TTA. His mother, Shelley, says she's selective of who her son hangs around with.
You're good kids or you don't hang out with my child. You know, like I said, I'm the type, I don't like them walking to the carryout by themselves. You're in groups if you go at all.
A walk from the park back to his friend's house on Main Street in East Toledo soon turned violent just before 8 p.m. Saturday. Marcus was carrying a metal baseball bat when an unknown group of guys approached the kids. Marcus and his friends started to run.
When my son started to run, they grabbed the baseball bat out of his hand and they smacked him in the back of his head with a metal baseball bat so hard that he fell on his face.
The suspects fled before police arrived. Investigators calling this a random attack. Marcus is unresponsive and in a coma.
He had severe bleeding and swelling of the brain. They had to remove part of his skull. Without surgery, he would have died.
Doctors tell Shelley the prognosis isn't good. He will be in the hospital for weeks, likely go to rehab after that, and the extent of damage done to his brain could take a long time to find out.
Some monsters decided to terrorize kids because that's what these are, is kids. And now my son is fighting for his life because some monster decided it'd be fun to smack a kid in the head with a baseball bat. I talk to him. I hope he hears me. I tell him to fight. Like I said, he's fought since the day he was born.
Shelley told 13 ABC her son's life has been a struggle from the start since he was born premature. She's praying for his recovery and that those responsible are caught.
We beat the odds once. He can beat the odds again.
It's a bad situation for both families, and prayers for the young man and Terry. But at the end of the day, it's just a shock. It's very heartbreaking.
Court documents show Pearson has a criminal history with prior charges including theft, stealing drugs, and breaking and entering. His family didn't want to appear on camera, but say they never thought he would do something like this.
I honestly don't think that my brother would ever do something like that at all. My brother is a loving person. I mean, he can probably get out his place sometimes, but my brother has a good heart when it comes to people.
TPS officials confirmed that Pearson was enrolled at Westfield High School, but says he had poor attendance. His cousin says he had big things planned.
He was going on the right track. He told me he wanted to do law. So he was he wanted to go to college. He wanted to be a good person. He is a good person, so he wanted to be like somebody that his nieces and nephews could look up to. That's Terry.
The story attracted a lot of attention on Facebook, and before we talk about the random thing, let's just point out that on the Toledo Police Station Facebook page, there were a lot of comments, lots and lots of people, mostly from black commenters, who were reminding people that just because a bunch of black people almost killed a white kid, that doesn't mean race had anything to do with it. And they were severely critical of anybody who looked at that and said, you know what, I think that's part of a pattern. Of course, the TV station must have anticipated that, because how many times did they say it was random? I counted at least 5, including the headlines. You know, the word random has got to be one of the most powerful words in the language because it packs so much meaning into it. So to say that, you know, Colin, I mean, if somebody said to me, like, Colin, you have a particular type of girl that you've gone out with in your life, and I would say, oh, no, I like them all. Like the Lord, I like them all. And then somebody would say, well, Colin, looks like you've gone out with tall, you know, lots of tall blondes here, lots of girls from Asia there. That doesn't look random. I mean, why are you so eager to disguise the fact that you have a proclivity for those two types of lovely ladies? Well, I wouldn't have an answer to that. But to say it's random is to say, not just to say something is true here, but it's to say a whole host of other things are also true. So to say this beating in Toledo is random is to say that there are a proportional number of white people rolling around the streets of Toledo beating up black kids. There are a proportional number of Asian people in Toledo beating up black kids. But what we find in Toledo is the same thing we find all over the country, that this kind of interracial violence is wildly out of proportion by a factor of 9, 10, 20, 50, 100, 1,000, depending on what kind you're talking about. But yet the TV stations are so eager to repeat the big lie, to perpetuate the greatest lie of our generation, the hoax of black victimization, that somehow there is no pattern. This is random. That's a lie. That's a lie meant to cover up the true nature of this violence. Just a few months ago at the Kavanaugh hearings, remember those in front of the Supreme Court? The guy from Senator Whitehouse, that's his name, Whitehouse. Senator Whitehouse from Rhode Island got up there. He's a former prosecutor. And he reminded everybody that even though we don't have, you know, recordings and inside dope on the Supreme Court, we do have proof that they are biased in favor of conservatives because there is a pattern to their rulings. And he went on to say that patterns are proof of bias in every court in America. And so to cover up to say that this thing is random is to say there is no pattern, is to say, Colin, sorry, but your whole thing about black crime and violence is all wildly out of proportion. And once you start saying that also means a lot of other things are true, right? It's like, okay, well, then where are the 911 calls, the victims of all this white on black violence?
Please, sir, I want some more.
The fellas and their people, their enablers on MSNBC and CNN will tell you that over-policing in black neighborhoods means that you ignore all these other crimes of violence because white people are doing it too, just in the same amounts. Wouldn't it be pretty if that were true? But it's not true. I mean, there's not one police department in America that's not under the sway of this enormous level of racism, that they're ignoring what white kids do and they're going to pick on black kids just because the black and all these crimes of hyper violence. Man, talk about conspiracy theories. So we're just sitting here looking at these patterns and going, yeah, that's a pattern. Oh yeah. Uh-huh. And the reporters are telling us, no, that's wrong. There is no pattern. Wow. How do we get a better example of the greatest lie of our generation perpetuated over and over and over than this story? And all for the same reason. They just don't want to make the black kids angry.